Welcome to the ZoomInfo Labs podcast. I'm Ben Salzman.
And I'm Millie Beetham.
Today, we're happy to have May Habib, co-founder and CEO of Writer, on the podcast.
May has been an entrepreneur for over a decade, and her journey in AI is nothing short of inspiring. Writer has become a leading player in enterprise-grade AI.
We hear about May's thoughts on being ahead of the curve in the AI revolution, experiences building Writer, and the challenges of scaling AI in the enterprise.
Whether you're passionate about AI or curious about the future of enterprise technology, you'll enjoy this episode. Let's get into it.
Well, welcome to the ZI Labs podcast. Very excited to welcome May Habib, the CEO of Writer. And this is especially fun for me because you really are one of my favorite people and one of my best friends. Excited to have you on the podcast. How are you doing?
10 years now, right? We've known each other for 10 years.
That's right. So can't wait to hear all about how you're doing, the journey, everything at Writer. And just thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks, God.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. Give us the sort of background on who May is and sort of where you come from and all of those things first.
Yeah, I've been an entrepreneur for a decade plus. Writer is our second company. Wasim and I have been collaborators for 12 years as we've worked together. Before that, I covered tech as an analyst and an associate at an investment bank, and then at a sovereign wealth fund. And I grew up in Canada. I'm Lebanese, and split my time now between San Francisco and London.
Awesome. And you were at the World Economic Forum for a little bit. Talk for a few minutes about what you were doing there.
Well, I was both a global shaper and a young global leader now. And, in kind of both stints, it's been great to have kind of a public stage or a global stage to really iterate on the missions that we're on. And in our first company, we were in the machine translation space, and that was a mission that was really important to me and Wasim. We thought, the language you were born speaking shouldn't dictate the kind of economic life you had. And that's what really got us into machine learning. He had been in the space before, and we began with statistical machine learning. With Writer and now our vision of really empowering people to transform work with AI, there is a real desire on everybody at Writer to make sure that we leave no user behind. It is not intuitive for a lot of folks. And ChatGPT certainly blew it all open, but even now, there's minuscule penetration, and AI is over the heads of a lot of people, right? And so a lot of the inequality that got us down this path to begin with, could be magnified 1,000x in the kind of AI haves and have-nots. So that's been, a big focus for us and just how we've developed and gone to market as well.
I sort of think of you as the archetype type entrepreneur. You're sort of very scrappy, resourceful. You're a fighter. You can sort of do everything for a company. When did you realize entrepreneurship was for you and that this is sort of going to be your life of starting and running companies?
Oh, as a child. Okay. Yeah. I got my first job. I was probably 8 years old. Worked at my dad's stamp and tool shop. I filed stuff, and then I got my brothers to do the filing so that I could move on to other, higher quality tasks to get that paid more. Yeah. But I always, I've always had a side hustle. And always felt like my parents, Monday to Friday was for working every waking moment you could.
And I can't wait to get into the full journey of why you started Writer, how you're building it, all the things about it. But, one of the things that I think occurred to me when we first met is that, yes, you were going to be a founder. You're going to have to be a product expert, a product and engineering expert, but you're also going to have to become a sales and marketing expert and just go really deep on how does enterprise sales work? How do you think about demand, all those things? Share with us, if you could, a little bit about that journey of learning how to be an expert in sales and marketing, which I consider you to be truly an expert in this.
Oh, I appreciate that. I never really set out to be an expert in go-to-market. It's you work backwards from the customer and what the customer needs, and continuing to stay with the customer as the technology evolves, the space evolves, their needs evolve. It forces you to sit both in EPD and go-to-market, because you're learning what resonates with the customer, right? Right now in our space, enterprise generative AI, we've built a platform around the LLMs. And we're the only company that has built both the LLMs and the product suite for the enterprise that makes it easy to take LLMs, plug it into their data, build really useful stuff on technology. And, the language, for example, being able to scale and maintain AI apps and workflows, knowing that resonates with the customer, because they're always talking about that, and circling that back to go to market to make sure that's what we emphasize, making sure that gets into the product roadmap, right? Where else can we make it easier to scale and maintain the things that you're building? That comes very naturally for us. And I think a lot of our success in scaling over the past couple of years has been in, the culture of that early 0 to 1 team. Our values are connect, challenge, own, really helping imbue the next 50, the next 100, the next 200 employees that join the company with that. And so I would say, I hope folks agree. I mean, customers certainly tell us this, that everyone at Writer really feels like a product expert. And in generative AI, to be successful, you got to be a few steps ahead of the customer. You have to walk in and be the smartest people they have talked to about generative AI in the last year, right? And that's a tall order given who else is at the table.
So let's talk about a little bit about sort of beginnings of Writer. I think it feels like most entrepreneurs have this sort of feeling of like looking back, if you knew what you knew then, like what would you have done differently? But it felt like you had a very clear picture of what this company was going to be like. Share with us, if you could, what was that aha moment for you around like, this is the right company to market? And you did this well before everybody was talking about AI. So if you could weave in some of how you peaked around that corner.
2020 was a tough year. It was the first year of Writer. We did our seed that first quarter. In the machine translation company, we had been using BERT, and we had discovered, encoder decoders, right? And what the transformer could do relative to previous generations of machine learning products and approaches for translation was just mind-blowing, right? Now, I don't think any of us would have really foreseen just how fast, like just the scaling laws, what it did to the approach. But for us, it was just a increasing set of like drumbeat of proof points that was like, we gotta go do this. And the company we called Writer because this was so obvious that AI was going to be better than people at reading and writing. And now fast forward a few years, natural language is the interface to all of tool building and software and intelligence. And, we say if you can write it, if you can describe it, you can build it. Now, it's a little bit more complex than that, but truly, if you're a sophisticated business user, you're building your own tooling now. And we're doing that in 35 languages. And that we definitely did not foresee 4 years ago. But, this is a really ambitious team. We think the closer we get to AGI, us and other folks, the more the enterprise needs help getting that to work inside of their businesses. And it's going to require, vendors to have a set of requirements and meet a set of requirements that, we feel like we have a really good idea of what they are. And so the vision and ambition continues to be the most enterprise-grade generative AI vendor in the market.
And so tell us, let's go deeper on the product itself. I think you've sort of described it as a full stack go-to-market or a full stack AI platform for enterprises. What exactly are you doing for your best customers, and maybe where do you find them and take, like, when you get there, what do you see? And then when you get them in a really good spot, what does that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the kind of realm of use cases, we think about team productivity use cases and individual productivity use cases. So we are in team productivity, right? Folks are sometimes surprised that the Microsoft Copilot team are customers, right? And it's like a real demonstration of just how much determinism and control you need for use cases that are about the team doing things differently and doing things consistently differently. Within that realm of team productivity, we think of use cases as falling, in a map of high accuracy requirements and high data complexity, right? And the things that are like lower complexity on the data side and maybe, a bigger latitude for error on the accuracy side, you don't need a ton of engineering or power, right, around those solutions. So we are in the upper right quadrant, right? If you are changing the way you do clinical medical history reviews to now incorporate AI, incredibly powerful use cases that we serve in the healthcare space. You're taking, a 2-week process to go through, a 300-page medical history for a breast reconstruction surgery or a partial knee replacement. Someone is disputing the claim, and now the healthcare company is literally going through and adjudicating it. And we can get a process down from 2 weeks to 3 days with AI. Like, that's literally hundreds of millions of dollars of value, right, at stake, billions across the whole industry. And you just got to be right? If you're going in and saying, we're going to change your job, we're going to change your job, and we're going to change these workflows, it's a real high accuracy threshold. On the complexity side, we like to say that a lot of the most important data for generative AI sits in people's heads, because what you are doing is standardizing knowledge work. And so a lot of the use cases that folks try first, right? Data sits in a database, great, right? The impact of that is not transformational. When we say transformational, we mean in a couple of years, the way people do their jobs in this function is utterly unrecognizable. In generative AI today, even before AGI, you've got the capability to do that. But it requires a really different approach to designing the solution and using the technology and involving the human beings who are doing that job, right, to bring them into the process and make them the guide.
You all have had your own family of LLMs for years now, and you continue to release new models that compare to the major LLMs in these benchmarking reports. And you recently launched things around sort of a healthcare specific and a financial specific model. What are some of the benefits and risks when you all are building your own LLMs?
Yeah. So the benefits are really about making that whole full stack domain specific, right? And what we mean by full stack is, think of Writer as like a generative AI platform as a service. And that platform draws on LLMs, on RAG, on AI guardrails, on orchestration. And you're essentially creating a bunch of like highly customized microservices for your company that become reusable for all the applications you build on top. And the reason to build our own LLMs is so that the rest of it has a lot of consistency and accuracy and predictability. And when we're able to go domain specific, it really makes the accuracy and the efficiency of like how long it takes to build a use case just that much faster. But you got to work backwards from a good understanding of the types of use cases. So, if you are a wealth manager and the use cases around, querying across various prospectuses to make a recommendation, the way that you actually compare those documents, right, against like guidelines for great advisory is different than, a nurse making a recommendation in a home visit based on, a set of documents and charts for a patient. And so working backwards from those use cases allow us to put training data together for those models to make them much better at, tasks that the model has seen before.
And so I remember when you first launched this company, it made sense to me, but I thought this is sort of like a market that I don't understand well. And then when ChatGPT came out, I was like, oh my gosh, of course May was in the right place, before everyone else. A, how did you see this coming? And B, why didn't you tell me about it before?
You're hilarious. I think it definitely required a lot of guts because our first company was doing pretty well. Now this is going extremely well, but, it was kind of top decile SaaS well, right? Top quartile SaaS well. So it took a lot of courage. And I credit Wasim, my co-founder. I think one of you has to be a burn the boats person. And I think I had high conviction but he had like bet the farm, bet your life conviction. And it really took that, I think, for us to, start completely over.
And was he picking this up on Hacker News, from Reddit threads, from group chats?
From, being deep in the technology and building, right? And I think, I don't even think GPT-2 is out. So this was very early. But I think, he definitely saw it before everybody.
Yeah. And then you went out and bought writer.com, which at the time I thought, oh, one word that everybody knows, that's a really good domain. But then writer took on an entire new meaning, and it's sort of like the main thing that people think of for this. If you can you share the sort of 1 minute story on how you ended up acquiring that domain? And did you feel like after you had bought it, you must have felt even more conviction than before as things started to change?
Yeah. And we have Writer AI as well. And we kind of went back and forth that year of, are we Writer AI? And it's funny, in 2020, the AI part felt like it would scare people, right? That we would not be putting humans at the heart of it, et cetera. I think now they're not interchangeable, but we do use Writer AI often as well. But in terms of buying the domain and even coming up with that name, OmniWriter was, on a list of suggestions that my brother-in-law had WhatsApped me one day. And I was like, oh, Omni's pretty good. It's funny that OpenAI's got an Omni model. But that was a very hard to get domain. I think someone is OpenAI now, Omni AI. Anyway, I was like, well, one day I was like, what about just Writer? And then the person who owned the domain has literally owned it since the beginning of the internet.
Really?
Yeah. And so we're only the second owners of that domain.
Wow. Prescient. I mean, it's couldn't pick a better name in this AI world. So what are your customers asking you to build next? If you sort of fast forward a year or two, where do you see Writer's products going, and what are you most excited about putting in front of customers?
Yeah. I think I'll tell you what they're asking and then what they're not asking that I think we're building. Yeah. I think, what folks are asking for is all of the reporting and observability and ROI and value tracking. And, as you go from 100 users to 10,000 users, and folks are building their own applications. I was on with a CXO of a major professional services firm this morning, and she was showing me what she had just presented to the management committee. This is a Fortune 50, and it was so cool to see the builder mentality of these business people, and getting deep into the weeds of tax summaries of R&D strategies being AI generated, and that level of depth and rigor, I think, brings with it a need to really manage and report on kind of how the resources are being deployed and what the ROI is that's coming out of it. The things that they're not asking for, but based on usage patterns and what we see, things that we want to build, really making it easy for engineering teams to, track. Certainly, we do a ton of evals at the beginning before we deploy something to production, but there is a real I think sense of frustration from other models around model drift. Now, we don't distill, we don't quantize, so what you build is what you get forever. But giving them the ability to really and I think this is going to become a regulatory requirement, measure against a set of eval criteria, based on usage patterns, just kind of a maintenance of what kinds of answers are coming back from the model cross use case. So I think we will build tooling around that.
And let's get more into the intersection of sort of AI and go to market. Maybe first talk about, if you could, the sales cycles and what you're sort of learning in this era of go-to-market versus previous eras. I think when we had on James from OpenAI to the show, he made the point that everybody knows this is a big deal. And so this is not going to be like the sort of early adopters and the CrossFit cats. It's everyone's sort of there at the same time, but at different levels of requirements, different levels of, justification, et cetera. talk to us, if you could, about what are these enterprise sales cycles like, and what's been surprising, good and bad, on that?
I mean, it's a fire hose, right? So absolutely everyone is at the table. Yesterday, I wanted to debrief a big CIO meeting I had just had, but the rep was already into another call with a CIO. Her manager was yet with a third CIO, and we had to debrief. And like all three of us had been pulled out of things for the like really important things. So like it is thank goodness, we were very grateful for it. There's so much, everybody wants to talk. The honeymoon is over though. And we were very conscious at the beginning, literally out of hundreds of customers, only one ever had budget that came from innovation funds. And we're very careful around, like, we don't close deals if there isn't a use case and a business plan and like a whole roadmap that we tie into that's strategic, because the funny money goes away, that person goes away, and it really sets you back. You don't learn anything. And right now we're in this really privileged position of getting to choose who we work with. And, we spiff around where we want to learn. And
meetings with the sales reps.
Yes. And the solution architects of like, these are the types of customers and the types of use cases where we'd like to learn more. And if you don't do that, then you take in anything and everything because everyone's lined up, and you don't build a durable strategic business.
Yeah. What a world where, the frontier AI companies like Writer, really demand is not the problem. It's focus, and it's picking the right customers. And what are companies doing when they achieve savings or ROI from these investments? I think the big question at a lot of boardrooms and for the CFOs out there is, are we just taking the savings and, applying it to margin and getting, more profitable? Or are we reinvesting those in other places? What are you finding people doing with these resources when they are moving things around?
We're not there yet. I think boards are saying, we spent a lot of money. Why is it not showing up in the P&L? And even in our customers where there's tens of millions of dollars of hard ROI, you got to make real strategic decisions to grow that and have that be, a sustainable movement right in the P&L. And folks have got to make tough decisions around how you restructure, how you change resource allocation. Avoidance of headcount is nice and easy, and everyone feels good, right? And that's real savings. I'm not poo-pooing that. But turning off agency spend, you're ripping off somebody's safety blanket. And so, and especially in the enterprise, this kind of third-party spend, you got to incentivize those people to be switching that off. So, it's a very sophisticated conversation, I would say. And I think it's those kinds of structural changes to how companies, margin profiles look is going to happen in a much shorter time frame. And soon, very soon, as we get closer to AGI, I think the FOMO is going to be unreal, and folks will be even more concerned about the survival of the kind of going concern than they even have been.
Yeah. And what is the countdown to AGI in your mind? When is that happening?
I think within a compound AI system, it's 12 to 18 months of holy crap, mind-blowing stuff.
I feel like I'm already at mind-blowing stuff, right? Just talking to these latest models and hearing some of the two-way voices.
Yeah, I mean, you've always been ahead of the curve on automation, right?
Well, this time around, I feel like I'm just struggling to stay above water or find the right ways to test this stuff.
That's a full-time job.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I literally spend almost all of my sort of night time, 10 to midnight is okay, let's free up some time. What can we do? What does this thing do for me? It's fantastic. Let's go a little deeper on AI within your own go-to-market, and then what you're saying. I know, Writer is sort of in different use cases, not specifically sold to go-to-market teams, although many marketing teams are driving the demand for it. But how are you all using AI in your own go-to-market at Writer?
Yeah. I think the usual answer to that is like account planning, et cetera. We don't really use a lot of that. Yes, summarize a 10K, query a 10K, earnings call summary, et cetera. But we use it to connect the dots internally big time. And when you're growing so fast, literally just on my way here, somebody gave me a call about like, this is a P0 use case, right? And like, who do we have that they could talk to who's done this exact thing? And they knew it was so fresh, they weren't getting an answer out of Writer, right? And that's what we use. That's how we use Writer, right? So like literally you can ask our internal custom chats that we have built, like what ROI stats can we share in retail? Who do we have in Europe that a CIO could talk to as a reference customer, and it's like when you can get a assistant like that that's plugged into Slack that ties to, right, all of the various types of sources of enablement material and training material on a real-time basis, like it's really transformational for the market. And we've helped build stuff like that for other customers. So that's been really the biggest way. In terms of helping our customers go to market, certainly enabling their go-to-market teams to self-serve into enablement and just knowledge has been huge. It's also things like, you've got a pharmaceutical sales rep who's about to go up and chat with a doctor, and it's a academic oncologist. So like, what are the academic oncologists? What do they care about, right? That we know about before I go in. So yes, account planning, but I think like when you actually sit and talk to a rep, like the like catching up on a company's news, yes, with AI, it's happening in 10 minutes instead of an hour. But, they're still needing to come up with what is the like yes solution, right? Like, and we see it all the time. You show somebody just the exact thing they need to see, like minute 5, you've got it. Like it's game over. If it takes you till minute 55, very different. And so if we can connect the dots for people on like what is going to be the winning thing to show that person, the stuff that's in the news about it is going to be a lot less relevant than the stuff that's in our business about it, if that makes sense.
Totally. And let's talk a little bit about how AI is changing sort of your philosophy on management principles, people management, et cetera. Maybe if you could, what are some of your key management principles in the way you sort of like run your company, and how have those changed with AI? You talked to some of these use cases, but it feels like we're sort of going to get to a place where we're hiring different people and expecting different things of them, and everything's going to change. Yeah. Maybe just generally on management principles, and then how AI has changed some of those.
Yeah. We've gotten very intentional around communicating what velocity means, and the 3 whys that come from that. Like, why is it really important? Well, our market moves very fast. Well, why does that matter? Well, we need to stay ahead of the market. Why does that matter? Well, because a customer is choosing an innovation partner, and they need to be able to believe that we're going to be able to evolve faster than this technology is changing. And when you've got a buyer who's already confused, right, and like doesn't want to make the wrong vendor choice, you have to be able to demonstrate over, the 4 to 6 month sales cycle that like you have been able to like maintain that velocity. So the way it manifests internally, like what we tell folks is we want to make decisions as fast as when we were a 50-person company, but we're going to make them differently, certainly. But, if we've had the same conversation 3 times, like somebody is going to have to make a decision right then and there, right? Like there's not a lot of tolerance for going around in circles. There is a ton of like leadership being very connected to the front line, kind of across all of our functions. We lead from the front, lead by example. There is a lot of kind of educate and give context in public, right? So like we onboard to that because it can be very jarring if
public with internally public or public on the internet.
In Slack.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of folks come from organizations where it's like a nice polite DM over to the side, and we're like, no, we don't do stuff like that. This is how we do it. And that we just need to like really induct people into that. It's impossible to move as fast as we need to if, folks aren't really doing a one-to-many, right? And then following up with the context, everybody onto the why. We take a lot of, time to make sure that like folks are learning and connecting the dots and seeing dots connected from across the business. And honestly, in onboarding, like if you're watching gongs that are older than 4 weeks old, you're doing it wrong. And we tell people like focus on literally what has happened in the business in the last month. That's it.
Yeah, totally. That's a great point. And I think to your point around communicating in public, I would take it even a step further. It feels like sometimes the best way for me to get out a message to our employees is just to talk about it on LinkedIn. Yeah. Like that's the place where they see it. So it's like there's one thing to sort of like publicly table it, with employees, and then there's like, tabling it. It just raises the bar on like, how clear can you be with the message? Like it really forces, I think, clarity on that. Let's, I guess, go to, a couple of other areas that I want to go deep with you on. What are some of the wildest takes that you have around where AI is going? Maybe if you could even, on some of like scary or not scary, like where are we heading societally with AI?
Scary is that a lot of the enterprise thinks AI is a scam. And that's bad for everybody. Obviously, it's bad for vendors. But I think the hyperscalers have produced just a lot of fear and like FOMO, or in their attempt to drive up FOMO. There are so many folks undergoing these like massive data transformation projects to like be able to use generative AI. And, there is, I think, a underappreciation for what generative AI can do to help leapfrog a lot of the things that folks are struggling with. And when you are, millions, tens of millions out in front of spend with nothing to show for it, like there is a backlash that could really hurt everybody. And it's not good for startups if there is, an AI winter because nobody's spending anymore on this stuff. I think scary is also the inability for a lot of products to really touch kind of that median user. And I think it is undertold the story of just poor adoption of a lot of tools. I mean, our target is consumer grade DAO to MAUs, and we really, customer by customer, are looking at that kind of data and going in and being like, all right, we need to go train those people. We need an on-site training here. Let's do office hours for these folks. And it is awesome when we hear, oh, this person on my team was kind of old school and like they are your biggest advocate now. Or these power users that I've got, those weren't the folks that I thought were power users, Yep. Or users telling us like, I was actually going to quit. And then I started building an AI studio and it's like, whoa, like my brain is on fire, and that's what we want to see. I think it's scary how little it's happening commensurate with the hype. Not scary is, I think, what AGI is going to look and feel like, very, very excited for folks to be able to see. Now, inside of a company, we need to be able to solve a lot of problems around how really, really powerful models get and access and understand, what is important inside of a company. And that's the next version of our knowledge graph and where our product goes. So we're very excited about, what enterprise AGI looks like.
Yeah. Feels like an AI winter is just not coming, mostly because the average person, if you ask them if they've used AI, they say yes. And the next question of like, do you use it at work is a no, right? And so if you use it at work already, as many of your customers, and of course we do, you already know that this is going to last and this is going to be here forever. I think it's fascinating that a shift this big with this much conversation is still underrated in my mind. Like that's a stunning difference, I think, with internet, mobile, social. These were just like things that just took a lot longer. Yeah. And they were probably not underrated. They're not underrated at the time. If you play it out five years, how do you want your employees and the folks that you've worked with over time to to remember you and to remember the impact that you made?
What a good question. One of our leadership principles is we help you win. And I hope that everybody at Writer now and, the next 500 people we're going to hire, in 5 years, the next couple thousand people we're going to hire are doing the best work of their careers, and they're challenged, and they have an impact on the world. I mean, we're inventing UX patterns and incredible HCI and a go-to-market that I think blends product, platform, and services in a way that is paradigm breaking. And I hope they feel really accomplished having introduced a new way of working, right, to thousands of companies.
Yeah. Well, if I know one thing about you is that winning is it's not it's the only option for your employees. So I'm sure you'll take them there. You've been so generous through your time. We're getting close to the end, and I want to be mindful that you have to probably get to a packed Friday afternoon here. Our sort of traditional last question that we ask folks is, who is the smartest person that you've ever known, and what did you learn from them?
Oh, it's an easy one. Wasim, my co-founder, definitely. And what I learned from them is anyone can learn anything. I mean, he's just got this real deeply held belief that literally there is nothing too technical or too hard for somebody to learn. And that has really infused into our organization. And we go deep, we go first principles. If you're in, then you're in, and you gotta understand it, and we'll make sure to help you. And that has carried through, and in lots of other parts of my life.
Yeah, and he is truly an amazing person, and the intensity that he brings, and just the sort of confidence that I think he instills around folks. I remember when we first met him, when we were working together many years ago, I thought this guy, he's going places. Okay, the last question, a fun one. You founded and you run a company called Writer, which probably means you probably think a lot about writing. Who is your favorite writer?
Oh my gosh. Oh, well, lots. But the first who came to mind when you asked that was Isaac Chotiner of the New Yorker. I just he's a friend. He's hilarious. And to me is a consummate writer. The writing is, of course, incredible, and so much meaning that is not on the page, right? And so he's in kind of this constant conversation with the reader. He's winking at you while he writes. And, I know a little bit about, his process and, the behind the scenes of how he gets to where he gets to. And it's just brilliant.
Fantastic. Well, May, we are so glad that we could have you on the podcast. This has been an amazing conversation. And I don't say this to everyone who comes on the podcast, I am genuinely stunned at, how you've just been able to build this incredible company from the ground up. And I know that you're going to take it all the way. I'm just so excited to watch the journey and to see what you continue to build at Writer.
Thank you, Ben.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the ZoomInfo Labs podcast.
With new episodes dropping every Monday and Thursday, subscribe to the show on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow me and Ben on LinkedIn and visit zoominfo.com/labs to get in touch.